Hi, my name is Vaughn, and I'm going to show you how to use the Mk6 mortar in ACE3 without the artillery computer. The tools that we'll be using for this is the 82mm range table, a micro dagger, and we'll be using 82mm HE rounds. My air resistance is disabled. I've obviously disabled the artillery computer. I've left the Mk6 compass to be enabled, and I have enabled ammunition handling, which I will explain in a moment. Ammunition handling is why I had to take mortars out of this box and put them into my backpack. I'm going to prepare a mortar by using ACE Interact on the tip of the mortar barrel, and I'm going to load an HE round. So I'm going to hop over here and pretend I'm my artillery observer for a moment and introduce you to my target. My target is that house, which is occupied by enemy civilians, having a party over there. And to get the information I need, I'm going to double tap R, but I'm going to hold R on the second tap until I see this red circle. Then I'm going to release R, and I'm going to have all the information that I need to put rounds on target accurately. So we see we have a range of 557 meters and an altitude difference of -12. This means that I'm 12 meters higher than the target that I just lased. So I'm going to go into my Notepad++, and I'm actually going to write this down. Excuse all this is from a previous test. So my range is 557 meters, and my elevation difference is -12. Since I am firing at a range greater than 450 meters, I need to set my charge to x to times 1. This will come in handy later. So we're going to back out of our vector for the second there. I'm going to come back over here, and now I'm back at the mortar. I'm my mortar gunner. So I'm going to open up my 82mm range table, and I'm going to select charge 1 at the top left here. And I'm going to find the range closest to the calculated range we had earlier. Since our range was 557, our closest range table range will be 550. I'm going to click that just so I get a faint highlight and I know where I'm going. So you see we have an elevation, of 1458. I'm going to mark that down in my range table base elevation, 1458. And since we don't need to use our multiplier, since the altitude difference is so similar, that will be our firing elevation. So I'm going to hop in my mortar. I already have a round loaded, as I showed earlier. I'm going to aim at my target, and I'm going to use page up and page down to raise my elevation in the top right as close as I can to 1458. Can't get there quite yet, because even with the artillery computer enabled, it cannot get an accurate solution on this target. So, I'm also going to point out that pressing F will change the charge in the top right from 0 to 1. This is what we want, since this is what we calculated for. Now that I'm ready, I've got my target lined up and my elevation set, I can go ahead and fire. And since I don't have a mortar gunner with me, I'm going to go ahead and load the other round myself. Fire. I'm just going to go ahead and do this for all the mortars in my inventory. Okay. So if we look, we'll be able to see that mortars will land on target. It's very simple to do, and the only time it gets somewhat complex is when we have a great altitude difference. Before we get talking about altitude differences though, we should talk about what happens if you can't see your target. This is a very common occurrence, and it will most likely happen if you're playing as a mortarman. So I have some enemy civilians set up behind this berm, behind this hill if you will. They're sitting right there. So I'm back in my artillery position, my artillery observer role, and I notice these guys and I say, hey, I need some targets pointed down on this target. Some rounds down on this target. I'm going to get an accurate marker placement, which is about right here. Let's go a little bit more to the left. Down, excuse me. So I'm going to be my mortar gunner with due diligence. I'm going to mark it red. I'm going to write, ignore that, HE fire for effect. And I'm going to write 2 rounds, because that's how many rounds I want put down on target. So, back into my mortar position roll, where I will be right next to the mortar. I'm going to load around, make sure I have enough in my inventory. I do. I'm going to use my little range dot, if you will, to get an accurate bearing on where I should be aiming my mortar. I'll be going over that way. And now here is where we need to figure out our altitude difference. We know our range, which is 635 meters, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that in my map, or excuse me, in my Notepad++. And now we need to figure out the elevation. This is going to be a little bit tricky for you, but it's really not that simple. Or excuse me, it's really not that difficult. So I'm going to mouse my micro dagger to the marker. And you'll see in the bottom right of my micro dagger, I have a number 139 meters. That is the altitude of where I'm looking at with my micro dagger, mousing over. So if I open up my altimeter watch, which you will have, I'll see that my altitude is 139 meters. This means we are on exactly the same level as each other. And I can just go ahead and use the elevation, the base elevation of my range table for charge 1 at 650 meters, which is 1431. Aiming my mortar at the target, I'm going to pull it down to 1431, excuse me. And if you want to be really accurate with it, you can kind of guess between these two ranges. So since I'm between 600 and 650, I will put my mortars on target, and since I'm kind of closer to 650, I'm going to keep it closer to this number, but I'm going to raise it just a tad. I'm going to put it to 1637. This should provide us with a very accurate firing solution. My charge is still 1 in the top right, and my artillery observer wants 2 rounds on target, so fire. Load another round. And I will fire again. Pop up my UAV terminal. So as you can see, we hit very close to our target. It was a near direct hit, and that one guy that was standing there was fucking Iron Man. I don't know. However, I will point out that since I found this out during testing, if you go with the straight 650 meter range, and you use that base elevation of 1431, your rounds will land a little bit about here. So it's useful if you kind of guesstimate between those two ranges. The next range lower, and the next range in your main range, excuse me. So there are some instances where you may find it useful to use a multiplier, and these instances occur when there is a great height difference between you and your target. I would like to hit that post up there. As you can see, I got pretty damn close with my last run. So I'm going to go ahead and do my double tap and hold R, get my information, and I've actually already put it in Notepad++. Go away now. So range 981, elevation 175, and my charge is ×1. My range table range that I set is 1 click because it's slightly closer to 1,000 than 950. So opening up the 82mm range table, I'll go ahead and get my base elevation. Now, since it's kind of between 950 and 1,000, I decided to pick a number between 950 and between 1348 and 1333 for my elevation. I decided to pick 1340. Obviously, the more accurate your guesstimate is, the more accurate your rounds are. That's kind of cool, in my opinion. So, since there is the, looking down on here at the multiplier, we see multiplier times 1.75. I got the times 1.75 number with this. 175 meter height difference means a 1.75 multiplier. If my height difference was 200, my multiplier would be 2. And if my height difference was 250, for instance, my multiplier would be 2.5, so on and so forth. So, now that I have my multiplier, I'm going to go ahead and find what number I need to multiply that with. And the answer to that is on our handy 82mm range table, going back to charge 1. And we see both the values for 950 and 1000 at the difference in elevation per 100 meter, I'm assuming that means difference, is 7. So when you multiply 1.75 with 7, you get 12.25, which I rounded down to 12. Now, this is very important. Since the target is above me, I will subtract 12 from 1340. Do not add 12 to 1340, because you would only add if you were above your target. If you add 12 in this situation, your mortars will land about right here. And if you've got friendlies there advancing on that hill, that's no good. So we're going to hop back into our mortar, which I prepared a round in. We're going to look down our little computer, our little site, and you'll notice in the top right, I already set the charge to 1. I made that mistake a couple times. And we're going to go to firing elevation in our spreadsheet, which is 1328. And I misfired there, but no biggie. I'm just going to set that 1328 and we'll get a more accurate round on target. And as you can see, we're putting accurate rounds on target on top of that cargo post. If you have any questions in the comments, let me know. But that about covers it all. As always, I've been Vaughn. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.